My son got $55 million and threw me out of the house. Weeks later, he came crawling back begging for my help. Please stay with me while I share everything that happened. And if this story touches your heart, don't forget to show some love by liking, sharing, and supporting us. My name is Helen. I am in my late 50s, and for as long as I can remember, my whole life revolved around my only son, Andrew. His father walked out on us when Andrew was just 3 years old. He left me with nothing but bills and a little boy who didn't understand why his dad wasn't coming back. From that day on, I promised myself I would never let Andrew feel abandoned again. I became both his mother and father, even if it meant sacrificing everything I had. I worked 2 jobs for years. During the day, I cleaned offices. At night, I worked as a cashier at a local grocery store. I came home exhausted, sometimes with sore feet and barely enough energy to cook dinner. But the moment I saw Andrew's face, smiling at me with his homework spread out on the table, it gave me the strength to keep going. I wanted him to have the childhood I never had, and I was determined to give him every opportunity to succeed. When it came time for college, I picked up extra shifts to make sure he had tuition covered. We didn't live in luxury, but I made sure there was always food on the table and books in his bag. I skipped buying new clothes for myself, skipped vacations, skipped rest, just so he could have a chance. Andrew was smart, ambitious, and full of big dreams. He wanted to start his own business, and even though I barely had savings, I helped him with the little I could. I cooked for his late-night study sessions, drove him to meetings when he didn't have a car, and even dipped into my small emergency fund when he needed a bit of seed money. Years of hard work paid off for him. One day, Andrew sold the tech company he had built with his friends. The news spread quickly. He had made $55 million from the deal. I remember the day he told me. He came to the small kitchen where I was cooking dinner, his voice bursting with excitement. My heart swelled with pride. All I could think was, finally, his life will be easier, and maybe mine too. For the first time in decades, I thought the weight on my shoulders might finally be lifted. But money changes people. At first, it was small things. Andrew started dressing differently, speaking differently, spending time with people who drove expensive cars and looked down on folks like me. He began to correct the way I spoke, as if I embarrassed him. Soon, he didn't want me showing up at his new house when his friends were around. He said my old-fashioned ways didn't fit his new life. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just a phase, that deep down he was still my boy. Then came the moment that broke me. One evening, he sat me down and, without even looking me in the eye, told me I needed to leave the house. The house I had helped pay for when he was struggling. The house where I had folded his laundry, cooked his meals, and prayed for his future. He said it was time for me to live my own life, and that he didn't owe me anything now that he was successful. His words cut through me sharper than any knife. I packed my things quietly, tears blurring my vision. As I closed the door behind me, I couldn't help but wonder how the little boy I once cradled in my arms could grow into a man who threw his own mother out. I thought I had lost everything that night, but I didn't know then that life had a way of turning tables. After Andrew threw me out, I carried what little I had into a place that barely qualified as an apartment. It was a single room above a noisy laundromat, the kind of space where the walls seemed to close in on you at night. I paid for it with the small savings I had managed to scrape together, money I once thought I would use for retirement. Now it was my only lifeline. The rent took most of it, leaving me with just enough to cover cheap groceries and electricity. I told myself it was temporary, but deep down I knew this was my new reality. I kept a brave face when neighbors saw me carrying groceries in my arms instead of bags from a car. Some of them looked at me with pity. They had heard whispers of Andrew's success, and it didn't take long for word to spread that I wasn't living with him anymore. A few asked questions, but I learned to smile and say, "Oh, he's busy with work, you know how kids are." I didn't want anyone to see the crack in my heart. Nights were the hardest. I would heat up a can of soup on the tiny stove and sit at the small table pushed up against the wall. Sometimes I let it cool without touching it because I was too lost in thought. I pictured Andrew's new mansion filled with light, music, and laughter. I imagined him at a long table with plates of food I couldn't even pronounce, surrounded by people raising their glasses to him. The contrast made my little bowl of soup feel heavier than it should have. Andrew's life had turned into something I couldn't recognize. He filled it with new people who claimed to be his friends. I heard stories. He was throwing parties, buying cars that cost more than my entire apartment building, taking trips overseas. Everyone loved him now. Everyone wanted to be close to him, but I knew in my bones they were there for his money, not for his heart. Still, he welcomed them while shutting me out. One day, I saw him at the grocery store. I was in the canned goods aisle, pushing a cart that squeaked with every turn. He came around the corner wearing designer clothes, a shiny watch flashing under the store lights. He wasn't alone. A couple of sleek-looking men and a woman clung to him, laughing at everything he said. My heart leapt before my mind could stop it. I thought maybe he would see me, smile, even wave. For a second, I let myself believe he might cross the aisle and ask how I was doing. But when our eyes met, his expression changed. He looked straight through me, like I was just another stranger in his way. He adjusted his jacket, turned his back, and kept walking with his new crowd, their laughter echoing down the aisle as if I were invisible. I stood frozen, clutching a dented can of soup, my face hot with shame. I wanted to cry, but instead I forced myself to finish shopping. By the time I got home, I was trembling with anger and sorrow. That night, as I sat in my small room, I couldn't help but think about the son I had raised. I thought of his childhood smiles, the nights I stayed awake sewing his torn clothes, the meals I skipped so he could eat. And yet, all of that counted for nothing now. He had traded me in for strangers who praised his wealth. Still, as much as it hurt, a small voice inside me whispered that life doesn't stay the same forever. The people around him weren't true, and sooner or later, money couldn't shield him from the truth. Sitting there with my soup, I closed my eyes and tried to imagine that day coming. Somewhere deep down, I knew karma had already started its quiet walk toward him. Andrew's new life looked golden on the outside, but cracks were starting to show. He spent money the way a child spills water, carelessly, without realizing how quickly it runs out. Within weeks of buying his first mansion, he was already upgrading to a bigger one with marble floors and an indoor theater. He filled the driveway with cars that gleamed under the sun, sports cars, luxury SUVs, even a limited edition convertible he hardly drove. Each new purchase seemed like a prize he wanted to parade around, but it was never enough. The parties became endless. Every weekend, music boomed from his mansion loud enough that people in nearby neighborhoods complained. Pictures of the events started circulating online. Andrew surrounded by women in designer dresses, men who wore suits that looked sharp but whose smiles never reached their eyes. They raised glasses of champagne, posted photos with captions about living the dream, and all of it made Andrew look untouchable. But I knew the truth. No dream lasts forever when it's built on quicksand. His so-called friends began introducing him to opportunities. A new real estate project, a promising tech startup, a luxury club venture overseas. They whispered in his ear, telling him he was smart enough, rich enough, and bold enough to double his money overnight. He poured millions into these schemes without asking questions. He thought they admired his brilliance, but really, they admired his wallet. I didn't hear this from Andrew. He hadn't spoken to me since the day he pushed me out of his life. But word travels, especially in a small community. One evening, Tom, an old friend of the family, came by my apartment. He was one of the few people who still checked in on me. We sat at the little table, drinking instant coffee, when he leaned forward and said, "Helen, I don't want to upset you, but I think you should know. Andrew's heading down a dangerous road." Tom told me about the business rumors. Some of Andrew's investments were already failing. A construction deal collapsed, leaving lawsuits in its place. A friend, who convinced him to back a nightclub, had disappeared with $500,000. And yet, Andrew kept smiling for the cameras, pretending everything was fine. Tom shook his head. He doesn't see it yet, but it's all catching up to him. Hearing it made my stomach twist. A part of me wanted to rush to Andrew, to grab him by the shoulders and tell him to stop before it was too late. I wanted to remind him of the lessons I had tried to teach him, about patience, humility, and hard work. But then I remembered his cold words, the way he told me I was nothing to him, that I should go live my own life. Those words stung fresh every time I thought of them. So I stayed silent. At night, I lay on my small bed and pictured him in that massive house, surrounded by people who would vanish the moment his money dried up. I wondered if he ever thought of me, if he ever felt a pang of regret. Probably not. Still, I couldn't stop the ache in my chest. He was my son, no matter how cruel he had been. A mother's love doesn't just switch off, even when it's bruised and broken. Yet, mixed with my sadness, there was something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. A quiet sense of satisfaction. Not joy, not revenge, but a steady reminder that life has a way of balancing itself. Andrew had soared so high so quickly, but already, the ground beneath him was shaking. His perfect world was not as solid as it appeared, and part of me knew the cracks would only spread deeper. I said nothing, but I listened. I waited, and in the stillness of my little apartment, I told myself that one day, Andrew would come to realize the truth he refused to see. Money can build walls, but it can't stop them from crumbling. It was a little after midnight when I heard the knock. At first, I thought it was the neighbor's TV or someone stumbling out of the laundromat downstairs. But then it came again, louder this time, uneven, almost urgent. My heart thudded in my chest as I tiptoed to the door. Living alone had made me cautious, but when I opened it, my breath caught. Andrew stood there. His once perfect hair was messy, his shirt untucked, and I could smell the alcohol before he even spoke. His eyes were glassy, and for a moment he looked like a stranger. But then he slurred my name, Mom, and my heart twisted. "Can I come in?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe for balance. I can't be around those fake people anymore." His words stumbled out, heavy with liquor and desperation. I froze. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. I could still hear his voice from months ago, telling me I didn't belong in his life, that he owed me nothing. That wound hadn't healed, it had only grown deeper. But as I stared at him, swaying slightly on his feet, I didn't just see the arrogant man who had thrown me away. I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, clutching his blanket, whispering that he was scared. That memory broke me. Against every bitter thought screaming in my head, I stepped aside and let him in. He stumbled past me, collapsing onto the worn-out couch in my small living room. He buried his face in his hands, muttering something about people using him, lying to him, laughing behind his back. His voice cracked when he said, "I don't even know who my real friends are anymore." I stood there silently, arms crossed, my emotions in a war of their own. A part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort him like I always had. But another part reminded me of the nights I cried alone, eating soup in this tiny apartment while he celebrated with strangers. I had saved him too many times before. If I saved him again, what would stop him from hurting me all over again? Finally, I spoke, my voice steady but sharp. "You can sleep on the couch tonight, Andrew. That's all. Don't expect more." He looked up at me, his eyes red, maybe from drinking, maybe from tears. For a second, I thought I saw shame flicker across his face. He nodded, too exhausted to argue. Within minutes, he stretched out on the couch and passed out, the sound of his uneven breathing filling the room. I stood over him for a long time, studying his face. He looked younger in his sleep, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in years. It reminded me of all the nights I worked myself to exhaustion just to keep him safe and comfortable. My chest ached, but I couldn't let my guard down. That night, I sat awake in the kitchen with a cup of tea gone cold. The apartment was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. A battle raged inside me. Was this the start of something new, or just another chance for him to break me again? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to being the mother who gave everything while getting nothing in return. Letting him in didn't mean forgiving him. It didn't mean forgetting the betrayal. It simply meant that, for one night, I chose not to shut the door on my own child. But as I watched the couch from the kitchen doorway, one truth settled in my heart. If Andrew wanted anything more from me, he would have to earn it. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted him to. The morning after Andrew showed up at my door, the apartment felt heavy with silence. He woke late in the afternoon, his head in his hands, groaning from the hangover. For a while, he just sat there on the couch, staring at the floor, as if gathering the courage to say something. Finally, he lifted his eyes to mine, and for the first time in years, I saw no arrogance, no pride, only defeat. "Mom," he whispered, his voice low. "I need your help." I didn't answer right away. I folded the blanket I'd given him the night before and placed it neatly on the chair, giving him space to speak. His hands shook as he rubbed them together, and he exhaled like the words hurt to leave his mouth. "I've lost so much," he began. "Millions. Deals that I thought were guaranteed. People I trusted, investors, partners, they turned on me. They're suing me now. Everyone wants a piece, and I can't keep up." His voice cracked. "I don't even know how it got this bad." I listened quietly, letting his words sink into the room. He was no longer the man in the designer suit who strutted past me in the grocery store. He was no longer the son who told me I wasn't welcome in his house. He was just a broken man, trembling under the weight of his own mistakes. I thought I had it all figured out, he continued, desperation creeping into every syllable. But every time I turned around, someone else was asking for more. I kept giving, kept investing, thinking I'd get double back. But now it's gone. It's all gone. He paused, his eyes glistening, and then he looked straight at me. You always saved money, right? You were careful. Please, Mom. Please tell me you have something tucked away. I just need a little to get through this. I can fix it. I swear I can. I stared at him for a long moment, then a sound escaped my lips, a bitter, hollow laugh that surprised even me. The kind of laugh that comes when pain turns into disbelief. Saved? I asked, my voice sharp. Andrew, do you know what I did with my savings? I spent them on you. Every dime I earned went to your school fees, your food, your clothes. I gave up new shoes so you could have textbooks. I gave up rest so you could have a future. I don't have anything left because my life was spent building yours. He flinched as though my words struck him harder than any lawsuit ever could. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to speak. You stood in your mansion, surrounded by people who only wanted your money, and you told me I was nothing to you. I went on, my voice trembling now with a mixture of grief and anger. And now you sit here, begging me for money I don't even have. Do you understand the cruelty of that? The irony? Andrew's shoulders slumped, his hands covering his face as silent tears slipped through his fingers. The powerful son who once looked untouchable was gone. In his place sat a man stripped of pride, shaking under the truth he could no longer escape. I should have felt triumphant, maybe even satisfied. But watching him crumble before me, I only felt the weight of years. Years of sacrifice, years of love, years of being dismissed and discarded. My heart ached, but I didn't reach for him. Not this time. He had always believed I would catch him when he fell. For the first time, he was realizing that I couldn't, and wouldn't. The reversal was complete. The son who thought he held the world in his hands was now powerless, while the mother he once cast aside held the only thing he truly needed, mercy. And mercy, I wasn't ready to give. Andrew sat hunched on the couch, his hands trembling as he wiped at his face. He looked so small in that moment, nothing like the man who once bragged about millions and walked past me in a grocery store without a glance. For a long while, the only sound in the room was his uneven breathing. Then, with a broken voice, he whispered, Mom, please. I need you to help me. I don't have anyone else. I leaned back in the chair across from him, folding my arms tightly over my chest. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to keep my face calm, my voice steady. Help you, I said, almost in disbelief. Andrew, do you remember the night you told me to leave your house? The house I helped you build your life in? You looked me in the eye and said you owed me nothing, that I should go live my own life. His head shot up, eyes wide with shame. I was stupid, he said quickly, his words tumbling over themselves. I didn't mean it like that. I was blind. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I didn't. I see it now. I was wrong. His voice cracked, and he pressed his palms together as though praying. Please don't hold that against me. I was so lost in all of it. A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. You were lost in your money. Lost in your pride. You chose everyone else over me. The people who flattered you, used you, drained you dry. And now that they've walked away, suddenly you remember I exist. Tears streaked down his face, and he shook his head violently. I know. I was an idiot. But Mom, I'm still your son. He dragged the word out, as if it carried magic that could erase years of hurt. That has to mean something. For a moment, his words pierced through me. The boy I raised, the one I worked myself half to death for, was sitting right there. But then I remembered the cold slam of his door, the humiliation of being told I wasn't wanted, the endless nights I sat in this tiny apartment eating canned soup while he dined in luxury. My heart hardened. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. You weren't my son when you shut that door in my face. You weren't my son when you treated me like dirt beneath your shoes. You only call me Mom now because you're desperate. My voice didn't waver, though my chest ached with every word. If being my son meant something, Andrew, you would have remembered it before everything fell apart. He broke completely then, covering his face with his hands, sobbing like a child. His shoulders shook, and his voice came out muffled between his fingers. I hate myself. I hate what I did. I don't know why I threw you away. I don't know why I thought money was more important. I can't take it back, but I wish I could. The sight was almost unbearable. The proud man had crumbled into pieces right before my eyes. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to reach across the room to comfort him. Not this time. This pain he felt, this hollow emptiness, was the same pain I had carried since the night he cast me aside. For once, he was tasting what I had lived through. I sat in silence, letting his cries echo through the small apartment. My heart felt torn in two, one half aching for the child I raised, the other refusing to let him wound me again. I knew then that if Andrew wanted forgiveness, if he wanted to be my son again, it would take far more than tears and empty apologies. It would take years of rebuilding, years of proving that the bond he once shattered could ever be trusted again. And until then, my shoulder would remain cold. The weeks that followed were like watching a storm dismantle everything in its path, piece by piece. Andrew's life, once glittering with parties and praise, began to unravel in plain sight. First, I heard about the mansion. The bank repossessed it after he failed to make payments. The news spread quickly, neighbors whispering, articles circulating online. I saw photos of the house, stripped of its furniture, gates locked, like a monument of wasted fortune. Soon after, the cars disappeared too. The shiny collection that had once lined his driveway was hauled away on trucks, one after another, leaving nothing but empty pavement behind. Then came the silence. The invitations stopped, the photos of him surrounded by friends vanished. The people who used to cling to him melted away like snow in the sun. His name, once spoken with admiration, was now a punchline. Everyone loves a rising star, but no one stands by when the star falls. His reputation collapsed under the weight of his mistakes, and the people he trusted most were the first to scatter. Occasionally, I would see him near my apartment. The first time, I almost didn't recognize him. He was walking slowly down the street, head lowered, his clothes wrinkled and his shoes worn out. He carried no confidence in his step, no arrogance in his posture. He looked like a man aged 20 years in just a few months. I froze at the window as I watched him pass, my chest tightening. For a second, I thought about opening the door and calling his name. But I didn't. I stayed still, my lips pressed together, forcing myself to remember the pain he had caused me. Another time, I saw him sitting on the curb outside a small cafe. His hands were empty, and he stared at the ground as people passed without giving him a second glance. Once, strangers had lined up to shake his hand, to bask in his wealth. Now no one even noticed him. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. He was my son, but he was also a stranger, reduced to nothing, stripped of everything he thought made him powerful. Eventually, I learned that he was picking up odd jobs. Carrying boxes for a delivery service, cleaning tables at a diner, even helping a mechanic sweep out the garage. The same hands that once signed million-dollar contracts were now blistered from pushing brooms. He worked for cash just to buy meals, just to survive another day. People whispered about him in disbelief. Wasn't that the guy who made millions? They couldn't reconcile the fall. I watched from the sidelines, silent, torn in two. One half of me felt an almost grim satisfaction. Life had shown him a lesson no lecture of mine ever could. He had thought money made him untouchable, that he could cast me aside without consequence. Now he knew what it meant to be abandoned, to feel invisible. A part of me thought, this is justice. This is what he deserves. But the other half of me ached in ways I couldn't describe. This was my child, the boy I had carried, the boy I once tucked into bed with lullabies. Seeing him reduced to this broke something inside me, even as it hardened me too. Maternal instinct pulled at me, whispering that I should step in, that I should save him like I always had. Revenge pulled the other way, reminding me of the nights I had cried alone, remembering how he had told me to live my own life as though mine meant nothing. So I stayed silent. I neither helped nor mocked. I simply watched, caught between the sting of betrayal and the pull of love. And as I sat in my small apartment, listening to the city outside, I knew one truth for certain. Andrew was paying a price that no amount of money could ever erase. It was late one evening when I heard another knock at my door. This time, it wasn't urgent or demanding. It was weak, almost hesitant, as though the person on the other side wasn't sure they even deserved to knock. When I opened it, my breath caught. Andrew stood there, and he looked nothing like the man I remembered. His hair was messy, his beard grown in uneven patches, and his clothes hung loosely on his thinner frame. His eyes were sunken, his skin pale, and in his hands he clutched nothing at all, not even the fake confidence he used to wear like a crown. "Mom," his voice cracked as he spoke. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." My heart clenched, but I forced myself to stay steady. He stepped inside, and I noticed how his legs shook with every movement. He wasn't drunk this time, wasn't proud or loud. He was just empty. He sat down at my little kitchen table, and when I put a plate of bread and soup in front of him, he didn't even speak. He ate quickly, almost desperately, as though he was afraid someone might take it away from him. Watching him like that brought tears to my eyes, but I bit them back. Afterward, he sat with his head bowed, his hands gripping the edge of the table. For a long moment, he didn't say a word. Then, slowly, his shoulders began to shake, and a sob broke free from his chest. He covered his face with his hands, his voice muffled through his fingers. Everyone's gone. Every single one of them. The people I thought were my friends, they took everything and disappeared. I have nothing. No one. I didn't move. I didn't reach across the table. I simply listened, cold and quiet, though inside me, something was tearing apart. Finally, he looked at me, his face wet with tears, his voice trembling. I see it now, Mom. Everything you did for me. You worked yourself to the bone just so I could have a chance. You went without so I could have more. And I threw it all back in your face. I told myself I didn't need you, but the truth is, I never would have made it anywhere without you. He shook his head violently, like the thought disgusted him. I was so blind, so stupid. I thought money made me better, but all it did was turn me into someone I don't even recognize. Hearing those words should have healed something in me, but instead it twisted the knife deeper. For so long, I had waited for him to understand what I gave, what I lost for his sake. And now that he finally admitted it, I found myself unable to feel relief. The hurt was still there, raw and alive. You say that now, I said quietly, my voice flat. But where was this truth when you shut the door in my face? Where was it when you told me I meant nothing to you? He sobbed harder, shaking his head. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I don't even deserve to be here. But I can't keep lying to myself. I need you, Mom. I need you in my life. Even if you hate me, I had to tell you I'm sorry. His words cut through the silence, and I sat frozen. Inside me, a battle raged. Part of me longed to pull him close, to tell him I still loved him, that he would always be my son no matter what. But the other part, the part scarred by betrayal, by endless lonely nights, told me to stay cold, to let him feel the weight of the pain he had caused. So I sat still, my hands clasped tightly together, forcing myself not to reach across the table. I didn't forgive him. Not yet. I wasn't sure if I ever could. But as his broken cries filled the room, I couldn't deny the truth that warred inside me. No matter how much he had hurt me, my heart still ached for my son. The next morning, when Andrew returned to my apartment, his eyes were steadier than the night before, but the defeat lingered in his posture. He had washed his face, but the weariness clung to him like a shadow. He sat at the table, waiting for me to speak, as if he knew I was the one holding all the cards now. I looked at him for a long time, remembering the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, and the man who had once slammed a door in my face. My heart was tired of breaking. I couldn't erase what had happened, but I also couldn't ignore what I saw sitting across from me. A son who had finally hit rock bottom. You want help? I asked at last, my voice firm. Yes, Mom, he whispered. I'll do anything. I leaned back in my chair. Good. Because I don't have money to hand you. I don't have savings hidden away. What I can give you is a job. His brows furrowed. A job. At the diner, I said, my tone unwavering. We need someone to wash dishes. It pays minimum wage, and the hours are long. If you want to eat, if you want a roof over your head, that's where you'll start. For a moment, silence stretched between us. His pride flared. I saw it in the twitch of his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. This was the son who once lived in a mansion, who once bragged about luxury cars and champagne parties. And now, I was offering him a place in the back of a greasy diner, scrubbing plates. That's humiliating, he muttered. I didn't blink. So was leaving your mother on the street. So was watching you squander millions while I counted coins for groceries. You wanted my help, Andrew. This is it. Take it or leave it. His shoulders slumped. The last of his arrogance seemed to drain away as he whispered, I'll take it. And so it began. The next day, Andrew showed up at the diner in clothes too clean for the job. My manager, Linda, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She knew my story, and she understood this was bigger than employment. She handed him an apron, showed him the sink stacked high with greasy dishes, and left him to it. At first, he struggled. His hands blistered from the hot water, his back ached from bending over, and the steady clatter of plates and pans wore him down. Customers never saw him. He was invisible now, tucked away in the back. Every once in a while, I would catch sight of him through the kitchen door, sweat dripping down his face, jaw clenched, shoulders hunched in concentration. And though part of me pitied him, another part, the part that remembered him mocking people who worked small jobs, felt a quiet satisfaction. This was justice. Not cruel, not vengeful, but just. He was finally living the life he once dismissed as worthless. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, Andrew changed. He stopped complaining. He learned the rhythm of the kitchen, the unspoken teamwork between cooks, servers, and dishwashers. He began arriving early, staying late, even wiping down counters without being asked. The arrogance that once dripped from his every word was gone, replaced with something humbler, quieter. One evening, after the rush, I found him sitting at a corner booth, exhausted but calm. His hands were red and raw, but his eyes, those eyes that once glittered with greed, looked different. Softer. Clearer. "Thank you, Mom," he said, his voice low. "Not for money, not for shelter. For this. For not letting me take the easy way out again." I didn't reply right away. I simply nodded, letting him sit with his own reflection. Inside, though, a strange peace settled over me. This wasn't revenge born of cruelty. This was revenge with grace, forcing him to earn back not only stability but also humility. And for the first time in years, I felt the balance shift. Justice had been served not in anger, but in quiet discipline. Andrew had been at the diner for months now, his hands no longer blistered but toughened from steady labor. He had grown leaner, quieter, and, most surprising to me, gentler. The arrogance that once clung to him like expensive cologne had been stripped away. He walked differently now, shoulders not puffed up with pride but settled with humility. It was the little things that revealed the change. He greeted Linda, the manager, with respect every morning, no longer irritated by her brisk instructions. He stayed late to mop the floors without being asked. He even smiled at customers when he passed through with bins of dishes, a far cry from the son who once scoffed at working-class nobodies. But respect, I reminded myself, had to be earned. He would sometimes try to talk about making things right between us, about forgiveness. I never snapped at him, but I didn't hand out absolution like a free cup of coffee. I had lived through the night he turned me out of my own home, and that scar didn't vanish simply because he was humbled now. "You're making progress," I told him one evening as we walked home together, the streetlights spilling pale light over the cracked sidewalk. "But don't confuse effort with entitlement. Trust isn't a prize you win back overnight." He nodded, eyes lowered. "I know. I don't expect you to forgive me quickly. I want to show you I'm not the same person anymore." And slowly, I began to believe him. He no longer spoke of money or schemes. Instead, he talked about things he'd never noticed before. How hard the single mother in the diner worked to feed her 3 kids. How the cook never complained even when his back ached. How he admired the patience it took to keep a place like that running. He was learning lessons he had never absorbed in his years of excess. For the first time in his life, Andrew began to respect not just me, but the quiet dignity of ordinary people. That, I realized, was a wealth far greater than $55 million. Still, I kept my heart guarded. I gave him kindness, but not the full embrace of forgiveness. He needed to earn every ounce of trust back, brick by brick. And he seemed to understand. There were no shortcuts this time, no handouts. Only work, humility, and persistence. One evening, after closing the diner, we sat together in silence. The air smelled faintly of coffee and soap, and the world outside was hushed. He looked at me and said, "Mom, I used to think I was rich. But I was the poorest man alive back then. I didn't value you. I didn't value loyalty or love or honesty. I lost everything to learn what truly matters. And I'm grateful you didn't give up on me, even when you had every right to." Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them back. "Gratitude is a start," I replied softly. "But what matters is who you choose to be every day moving forward." He nodded, and for once, I believed the sincerity in his eyes. As I walked home later that night, the cool air brushing my cheeks, I reflected on the long road behind us. I had lost a son once, swallowed by arrogance and greed. But now, sitting across from me, working beside me, was a humbled man who finally saw my worth. Not in money, but in the years of sacrifice I had poured into him. It wasn't a perfect ending, not a fairy tale. It was bittersweet, yet powerful, because in losing everything, Andrew had gained something far greater, a soul anchored in humility. And in him, I had regained not the son I lost, but the son I had always hoped he would become. Do you believe Andrew truly deserved a second chance after the way he treated his mother, or should Helen have closed the door on him for good? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.